Okay, guys. So I've already posted the assignment online. Honestly, it was kind of a mad dash to get this all finished. So there are some new requirements coming soon, but everything you need to get started is already here. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and download these reference images. I'm going to need all of these eventually. These first three I'll need immediately. The UV mapper texture we'll use in the second half of class today. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and save these. And actually, before I do that, probably the first thing I should probably do is open up Maya and do what?
New project.
New project. Okay, so if I go ahead and create my new project, I will have a folder to download those images into. Okay. So I'm going to go in here to File. I'm going to go to Set Project. Not Set Project, but Project Window. I'm going to hit New because we are working on a new project, and I'm going to go ahead and call mine Treasure Chest. And I just want to make sure I'm going to the correct destination for where I want my stuff to go. And I think I'm going to do mine in, we'll just do it on I'm just going to do mine on the desktop. Accept. And then just because I want to see where it's going, I'm going to go ahead and hit File, Save Scene As. And now I can kind of see where it's going. Okay. And if I want to, I mean, even though it's a blank scene, if I want to, I can go ahead and start my numbering scheme off. And I'll just call mine TC_01 for Treasure Chest 01. Okay. Okay, now that I've created my project, I have a folder in which I can download my images. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for right now. Go back online, and now I can save these images to that folder. So I'm just going to right-click, Save Image As, and I will go ahead and go in here and figure out where I am. Treasure Chest is on my desktop, and I'm going to go ahead and save it into my Source Images folder. Okay, I'm going to save TC Front there. TC side, TC top, and I'll go ahead and even just because I know I'll need it eventually, I'll go ahead and do my UV mapper texture as well. Okay, and I'll give you guys just one set. I'll give you guys a quick. So going ahead and progressing, now that we have our files in there, I can go back into Maya. And in the book last time, basically what they had you do is create image planes. There's nothing wrong with the way they had you create the image planes. I think we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We could use image planes, so I could come in here and instead of using, I could actually go in here and just like we did previously, I could go ahead and go View Image Plane and Import Image and go ahead and bring in my front reference like this. But the one drawback to image planes in Maya is that you can't see through the back side. Okay? So that is one downfall, and there's trade-offs. There's advantages to it too, but just realize that one of the things you won't be able to get around is the fact that you won't be able to see around the backside, which can be a problem. Okay, so with that in mind, just realize image planes are an option, but there is some trade-offs in there. So I'm going to go ahead and use, I'm sorry, image planes. I'm going to go ahead and use regular polygon object planes instead. Okay. So in the book, what they had you do was some complicated math to figure out what the ratio of the size of your image was. They basically said, okay, well, if it's 512 wide and 248 tall, let's basically set relative to a bigger number, we're going to figure out the ratio. That's complicated. We're going to do it a little bit simpler than that. Okay, so we're ready to bring in some reference images. The way I like to do it is I just like to look at what my images' sizes are. So if I go in here to Source Images, I can look at this, right-click, go to my properties, and right here inside the details there, you can see what my size is. Okay, 1024 by 1024. I made it even easier by going with a square image. Okay, realize you could do it with a non-square image. You could do 512 by 1024 or some other format. But if I keep it square, it makes my job really simple when I go to bring in my textures. Okay, but again, I'm seeing I've set my size to 1024 by 1024. With that in mind, I'm going to go back into Maya, and I'm going to go ahead and create my plane. So inside my front view, I'm going to go ahead and create a plane. Polygon primitives. Right now, I have interactive creation off, so I can't just click it like this. I'm going to go ahead and go to Cube, hit my Cube settings, and now I'm going to go ahead and type in that exact value I had. Right. I'm sorry, I just said cube. I don't want to do cube. I want to do plane. I'm going to go to plane settings. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and hit 1024 by 1024. Okay, yeah, not whatever I just typed in there. Okay, the other thing, I'll be honest, I'm not sure why they had subdivisions on their objects. I can't personally think of a good reason to do that. So I'm going to suggest that you set your width and height segments to 1, and I'll show you the reason why I think it's better to have no subsections in here. Okay, if I go ahead and leave it at 1024 by 1024 with my width and height segments to 1, I'm going to hit create. It's now created my object, and it actually did create it in this viewport. And that's fine. I can move this around. Okay. So, and this is actually that's my front viewport. Okay. So basically, this is obviously a lot larger because we're working on such a large scale. But what we can do is at the end we can scale it down. If we don't like the fact that our grid's so small in here, we could also adjust our grid size later on. There's several solutions to this part of it. Okay. Okay, the reason why I don't like having subdivided surfaces on here is oftentimes later on when I'm working on an object, what I'll end up doing is I want to be able to see the wireframe on the shaded. I want to be able to see the geometry. So oftentimes I'll go in here and go shaded, turn on my wireframe on shaded, and that works perfect, right? But if you have subdivisions on your reference image, you're also going to get those on there, okay? So that can be distracting, particularly once you actually load in your reference image and you actually have these lines cutting through your reference, okay? So as a general rule, I would suggest that you, on your image planes, you just make them 1 by 1 on the subdivisions and keep them just like that, okay? Okay, so we've created our first plane. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm ready to load in my reference image. So I can go up here and click the shortcut for the hypershade. And with that, I'll go ahead and create a new Lambert for my object. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Lambert. I can rename this. I'll go ahead and call this first one. Since this is more of a top-down view, I'm going to go ahead and call it top_reference. Hit enter because, again, we always want to hit enter so we don't screw up our computer. And now we're ready to go ahead and load in our reference image. Okay. We could do it inside of here. They kind of did it in a complicated way about dragging in your image. You can do that if you want. Or you can just go over here to the right side where you've got this little checkerboard picture. Click on it. And then it will ask you what type of texture you want to apply. Okay. First thing you can kind of ask yourself is it a 2D or 3D texture? Most of the time it's going to be a 2D. And then you're going to ask yourself, are you going to use one of these built-in options? Or do I actually want to use an exterior file? And in that case, I went ahead and clicked File from the options. Okay. As soon as I did that, it's updating my node in here too. Again, if I want to see kind of what's going on in here, I can see that it is updating content inside of the node editor. However, I don't really have to use this at all to get what I need done. So I'm going to do is over here on the right side. I'm going to make sure that I have my top reference selected, and then I'm inside of here, and you can see that I have an option to load in that image now. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this right here, and now I can navigate to my top TC top. I'm going to open it up, and now if I go back here, I can go ahead and select my image, right-click on my top reference, and assign it. Okay. Right now, I'm not seeing it apply to my object. What do I need to do so that I can see it on my object? Anybody? Okay, turn on texture view. Realize that by default, the textures will not view in your viewport, and this is something to keep your viewport running smoothly, because obviously when we load our textures, it's going to slow things down very slightly. At this point, it's not going to hurt us at all, but when you're working on complex scenes, textures can start to take a toll. This little checker box right here is what you have to press to actually get this taken care of. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it now. You can see that now my reference image has been loaded in. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and basically repeat those same steps. Before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and rename this one top reference. And it renamed it top reference 1 because it actually, we called top reference our material. So I may go a step further here and actually call this top reference _ plane, not flame. plane. Okay. And now what I can do is I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this. Okay. And now I have two of these, right? Okay. And with that, I can go over here to the rotate button, and I'm just going to rotate this 90 degrees. Okay. You can already see right there, I have a rotate value of 90 degrees. Okay. If I look through, I can see that I am facing correctly in here on my front viewport. Okay. Same thing, the texture is visible in this viewport, but I have to also activate it in here if I want to see that reference image. Okay. Now, right now, obviously it has the wrong image applied to it, but we're going to change that shortly. So what I'm going to do first is obviously rename this. This is now my front reference plane. And now I'm going to go ahead and go back into the Hypershade. And I'm going to go ahead and create another Lambert. And I'm going to go ahead and call this one front reference. Okay. And again, now I'm going to go ahead and hit the little checkerboard box to bring in a texture. I'm going to tell it I want to bring in a file texture. And now I can go over here to the image name location and navigate to that front texture. Okay. All that's left now is for me to go ahead and assign this. So I can go ahead and select here, go to my front reference and say assign material to selection, and you can see that I now have my other element loaded in. Okay. Okay. All I gotta do is basically do that one more time. Just because we've had a lot of issues with shaders, now is a good time to go ahead and save it again. So I'm gonna go ahead and say TC02. And I'm going to go ahead and do one more. So I'll go ahead this time, and I'm going to hit Edit. Actually, I'll do it from the front. I'm going to go Edit, Duplicate. And this time I'm going to rotate it. And we'll have to see which way. I may be rotating it. I think it's this way. We'll try this way, and we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to rename it. And this is going to be my side reference plane. And I'm ready to also go back in here one more time and create one more material. Again, going through the same exact process we just went through. Okay. And now, let's see, I'm already confused. I kind of confused myself about which one I'm looking at right now. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select this and apply my side reference. Okay, and one of the things I can already tell right here is that I am looking at the wrong side, so we'll go ahead and rotate it back the other direction. Oh, that's not any better. Here in a second, I'll figure out what's going on here with my side view. Okay, so now that we've gone ahead and we set up our planes, I can go ahead now and start rearranging them just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and, well, actually before that, let's go ahead and get our scale right. So I'm going to go ahead and drag over all these. And again, I could either change my grid size to better match my reference image, or I can go ahead and just scale this down. I think it's going to be easier probably just to scale this down. So I've grabbed all three together, and I'm just scaling them down uniformly just to get them back kind of in the general grid where it doesn't seem quite so huge. Okay. Okay. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and just lift these up. Right now, this is centered, so I don't like to work. This is personal preference. I don't particularly like to work on both sides of this plane, anyways, because if I'm going to usually do symmetry, it's going to be across one of these two axes, not usually mirroring over the bottom. So I usually will pull them above the plane, but again, this is a personal preference thing. Okay. I also will move these out. Okay. I think I did actually reverse them. This should be front. Yeah. me go ahead and reverse those back. So when I was picking, I actually did apply the wrong ones. Let's go ahead and select this is side, and this one is front. Okay, there we go. And I can tell because obviously my reference images aren't lining up. Now they do. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. Set that back to 0. So this reference image is right there on the ground. And now I can see all my different reference images. And more importantly, when I go into my different views, I should be able to see my different references. Okay. Okay. So the only one I'm having trouble with right now is this. And I just need to look through, I'll probably have to look through my settings here and to see what I switched at some point. But I can also, again, try this, I guess. Oh, there it is, and that's all it is. I guess I did originally have the right one, so I'm going to go ahead and switch this the other direction. Okay. And with this arrangement, I can now see, I can see my reference and the different reference images I have here. Okay. Okay. Now I told you one of the advantages of using polygons is that we could see through the back. By default, right now, you can see that we aren't actually able to. Okay. So there's a quick setting we have to change to be able to do that. And basically what we're talking about is back face culling. Even though we tend to see either a dark color or actually even a material on it, by default, every plane inside of a 3D package actually only faces in one direction. So this would be the direction it can face outward. So technically, this is just kind of a viewport visual, but if I were to render this out, which I can do right now, if I render this out, you can see I'm actually seeing through the back side of that. Okay. So the way we can go ahead and do the see-through back face, I'm going to go ahead and select all these, and I'm going to go up to Display, Polygons, and I'm going to go ahead and toggle on this back face culling. And by doing so, now we can see through the back side of our objects. Okay. This is helpful when we're trying to rotate around a 3D object to make sure we see everything from every angle, and because without that, sometimes you get behind these objects, and you're not able to see quite as clearly. Okay. Okay. So now that we have our image plane set up, we're ready to really get started in the primary piece here. I'm going to go ahead and save up one more time. Okay. And now we're ready to start modeling. So now that we have our reference image loaded in, let's go ahead and start modeling. I'm going to go ahead and start out by kind of identifying my primary shape with this object. I could do this several ways. I could probably start with a cube, since the bottom is fairly cubic in shape, and work my way up. Or I could start with a cylinder and kind of work my way down. Generally, when we're talking about a lot of modeling methods, you're going to start with a shape that is close to what you're trying to create. Okay, so I'm going to actually start with a cylinder. I'm just going to go ahead and go to Create, Polygon Primitive Cylinder. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll start out with just 16 subdivisions. And again, we're kind of going for a low poly asset here, so we're not trying to do a super hyper-realistic asset. When we keep geometry numbers low, we're reducing the overhead, so our games are going to run more smoothly. Again, it kind of depends on what you're talking about, what your platform is, on how high resolution you can go. But we're assuming right now we're doing a game that's probably for a mobile device, and that's why we're going to work on such a low resolution version. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. Okay. And basically, if we look at our reference, we can see I only really need the top half of this, right? I don't need the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of rotate it, get it generally oriented the same as my reference images. Okay, you can see it's generally about the same. And I'm going to go ahead and lift it up. This is where I can use my different viewports to kind of get it lined up. Okay. I'm going to start with it just kind of right here on this line. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to face mode. I'm going to do that just by right-clicking on the object, going to face, and I'm going to delete out the bottom half of this treasure chest. Okay? Because again, all I'm really looking for here is the top half. And now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead, back into object mode, just right-click object mode, and then I'm just going to scale that up to match my reference image. Okay? Now you can see the one problem I'm already having is that my object is starting to obscure my reference image. I'm not able to see it as well. And that's when you start having to consider other options, and one of those being I'm going to go ahead and just switch it to wireframe mode or X-ray mode, depending on my choice. Let's just look at the difference real quick. So we got X-ray looks like this. X-ray, you have a semi-transparent surface, but you can see through to things like your reference images. If you go to, on the other hand, if you go to wireframe, you're actually not going to see a reference. So that's kind of your trade-off. So in this case, we're going to want to stick with smooth shading and then leave it on X-ray. Okay, and so by doing that, we can actually see our reference in the background. Okay. In this case, we're not actually even using the grid right now. So if I'm finding these grid snaps distracting, I can go ahead and also turn them off up here as well. Okay, and I can really focus on just what's going on here. Okay, so I've kind of generally sized this to match, and now I've just got to look at it in the different viewports and see how it's doing in the different viewports. Again, I'm going to switch it to X-ray and X-ray. And I can see that this image, it's lining up pretty good, but on these images, it's not. You're going to kind of just choose the average or the one that makes the most sense. And it seems like when I'm in this viewport, I'm getting a little bit closer, okay? But again, now I can just go ahead and start scaling this to match my reference image. So I'm actually going to grab the scale tool here. Okay. Okay, and I can scale it up, but I can already tell you part of what I'm seeing here is that this actually is going to be kind of a boat. It's not a super straight object. So we'll have to look at how we can kind of achieve that same effect. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and I want to create this base from what I have here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, right click, go into edge mode, double click to grab that whole surrounding area, and then I'm going to go ahead and just extrude this out. So if I go over here to my modeling tools, I can go to mesh, edit mesh, and extrude, and it'll bring up this arrow. And the only thing you have to be careful about, by default it wants to move in the normal direction, which is not necessarily what you want. So make sure you just go to the move tool and it's set to your, make sure it's set on world transition, and then you won't have any issue when you get ready to pull it down. Okay. Again, I'm just using the space bar to switch back and forth between my reference images and what I have to work with here. So I'm just going to kind of get generally right. Okay. And again, now I still have that selected. While I still have this border edge selected, I'm going to go ahead and just fill that. So I'm going to go to edit mesh, mesh and fill hole. And we can see I've now filled that hole on the bottom. Okay. In general, when we're talking about geometry, the general rule is there should never be any edges or vertices that don't do anything. Okay. Now you got to be careful about cleaning up edges too early, but what I'm going to have you do right now is still an edge cleanup process, and it's actually going to make our process probably easier in the short term. Okay. So what I'm really talking about here is this edge right here, and also all of these edges are not actually doing anything. They're not affecting anything. These edges are all affecting the shape. We can see that they're actually influencing the shape of our object, but these actually are doing nothing. This whole area is completely flat, so they're actually doing literally nothing. And the quickest test to do is actually remove them and see if they have any impact on the shape. So if I select these and I go up to edit mesh and delete edge vertice and nothing changes, that's pretty good evidence that those were not influencing the shape if we didn't notice it. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Edit mesh, delete edge vertice, and again we can see nothing really came of it. I can also switch into vertex mode. I just want to make sure that I did remove those vertices that were right there. Sometimes you might get a lingering vertice hanging there, and you want to make sure that you take care of those. Okay, and by doing that, we've kind of simplified what we're going to be doing here next. Okay, so now we're ready to start lining this up with the photo. Okay, and I can choose where I want to start. I can start my front view, I can start my side view, my top view, and kind of, whichever one you want to work from. In general, it's probably best to identify the best photo first and work the most from that. No reference images are going to be perfect. So the problem you're going to have is you're always going to have times where the front looks perfect and the side's a little off, or the top looks perfect and the front's a little off. Ultimately, you have to kind of decide which reference image you want to follow the most closely. Okay, and generally you want to choose the reference image that has the highest quality. And in this case, I would say the front view is probably the clearest view of this object. Okay, so that's where I'm going to start. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start down here. I'm going to drag over these two selections, and I can do it. I can do this too, by the way. I mean, I keep selecting that object. what I can do is I can technically grab this and pull this side over and drag this and pull this side over, and there's nothing wrong with that. Ultimately, I'm lining up my reference images, but since this is a symmetrical object right now, I can also grab both at the same time and then use the scale tool to actually scale them both at the same time. Okay, either one is acceptable. Just realize that especially if you're striving for symmetry, you might want to use the scale tool or actually activate inside the transform tool. There actually is some symmetry settings you can use. Okay, so just realize if you're trying to do that, you may want to work a little differently. Okay, so in this viewport, I'm going to go ahead again. I'm just going to grab right here. Okay, and I can get these right, but I already noticed right off the bat, even though I can do this right now, I know I'm going to have to make some changes later because even though it looks right in this view, I know it's not quite lining up on the top. And again, these photos are definitely not perfect. I can see that I'm not lining up perfectly on both sides, so just realize even that now, you're not going to get necessarily perfect every time. Okay. And the reality is, no matter how hard you work, you will never find the perfect reference images. Okay. Okay. So I feel like the front view is pretty good for right now, at least good enough that I can switch to another view and kind of start working in that direction. So I'm going to go ahead now and switch to, let's try the side view. And what I'm going to do is go ahead, and this part's kind of hard to explain, but the object itself is going to bow up in the middle. So what this inner circle is actually the outer edge. You can see that as the treasure chest gets towards the center, it kind of bows up. So what I'm going to do is, with this outer edge here, I'm going to go ahead and just line the outer edge up. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. And I can do it in my different viewports. And really, I'm trying to line it up right here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay. I'm actually lining it up to this line right here. Okay. Now, it's not too bad. Some of my geometry got a little bit longer along the edges here. In general, obviously, the bigger the polygons, the harsher the edge. So if I wanted to, I could try to average them out a little bit more by moving these down, but then scaling them out just a little bit. And then try to get that. Ultimately, we want each of these segments around here to be about the same length. Okay? Because if we have it set up like this, for example, yeah, it's smoother up here, but now we have this really harsh line that isn't following even, it's even following less. Okay, so in general, you want to try to keep these segments about the same length all the way around. And some of the ways you can do that is, again, just by kind of tweaking it out just a little bit. Okay. Okay, so we've got our basic shape here, and we can now see that on the edges we're following, right? Or at least fairly closely. Again, we can see over here, we're kind of closer on the edges, but the middle is not bowing quite the way we want, okay? So again, if we want to add curvature that's not there when we're talking about polygon modeling, we actually have to start adding edge loops, okay? So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go ahead and go into edge mode. I'm going to select all these edges, and then I'm going to go up here and we're going to go ahead and add some edge loops.
Just under mesh tools.
There we go. Insert edge loop. There you go. You're absolutely right. I'm going to go ahead and do that insert edge loop, and I'm going to hit the settings. By default, it just allows you to add one loop, but I know it's going to take me more than one loop to do this entire area. So I'm going to go ahead and, actually we'll do one loop first, and then well, no, I don't. Let's do 6 at once. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, that didn't work. Mesh, edit mesh. I already lost it again. Yep. in the future, I'm going to show you guys how to create your own toolbar, which is normally how I work, because there's just so many tools in here that you won't be using that often. Okay, and I always forget, it does show up here. I keep expecting a dialog box to pop up, but it's actually right here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just choose 6 edge loops. You can tell, got some options here. If you're adding multiple edge loops, you really only have a few options, but when you add multiple edge loops, you can add it right here. I've got 6 selected. I'm going to go ahead and click here, and it's going to create 6 evenly spaced edge loops. Okay, it wasn't obviously random. I chose 6 because I'm trying to create a shape here so that I can outline where this is going to go eventually. Okay, so it wasn't a totally random decision. Okay, but now I'm going to go ahead and go into vertex mode and start trying to match my reference once again. So I can go in here, start pulling this up to get more of that rounded feature. Okay. 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 Okay, so I kind of got that rounding in this view. That's looking pretty good. Yeah. Okay, I'm just kind of looking at a couple different angles. And now we're getting kind of the front rounding is looking pretty good on this. We still have to do the extrusion for these in the long run, but for right now, we're getting just the general shape that we need. Okay, so from the front view, it's looking pretty good. Now from this view, we can see that it also bows in this direction. You can see that it's not just limited to, we're also bowing outward. So I can also grab these middle vertices. And actually, as I said, I can kind of eyeball it. I'm going to go a little bit wider here. And instead of using vertex, I might want to use actual whole edge loops here to kind of get this shape. Okay. Just kind of trying to, like I said, I'm trying to round it in. And here on the edges, I can't get the border edge. Double clicking will not give me that edge loop, so I actually need to either go to faces or to vertices. Either way would work. Okay. Again. Okay. I've gotten a lot of it. This one looks a little bit fugly. Okay. And then ultimately, you can start looking at it in your perspective view and kind of get a feel for it. Like, does it look good? Just kind of look at it from different angles. See if you're kind of achieving that rounded look you're looking for. Okay. It's pretty good. So now we're looking pretty good from the top. We're looking pretty good from the front. So the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is go into the side view here and just tweak it out a little bit. We can see that in addition to it also kind of tapers inward on the sides. So again, I can go down here to vertex, grab this, and then go ahead and taper it in. Okay. Okay. And again, if I find, you can see that it looks like it's gotten a little bit flattened here. I've lost a little bit of density as I went up at some point. So I can also, again, start grabbing these. And again, I've been using the scale tool, but you really can just grab and move them to kind of better fit. Don't feel like you're, if you feel like you're getting restrained by the tools, recognize that, again, you can kind of get in here and just manually tweak things, and sometimes that's the best way to get the result you're looking for. Okay? Again, I'm trying to kind of get some of that normal. Be careful. I do want to grab both sides of that, so I'm going to grab that. And again, this is where you get into some low-level vert tweaking, and you can just tweak until you get that artistic the result you're looking for. Kind of that overall look and feel. Okay. 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 That looks pretty good. I've gotten the general shape right. I mean, this looks pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the overall shape. A lot of times, what we're looking at when we're looking at a basic shape is we just want a nice, clean silhouette. If you kind of want to get a view of what your silhouette will look like, what you can actually do is go into your hypershade, and again, another good time to save up. I'm going to go ahead and save this as a 4. I'm going to go ahead and go into my hypershade, and I'll just create another Lambert, and I'm just going to call this. I can't spell silhouette, so I'm not going to try to do that. Black shape, and I'm going to go ahead and just make this the black layer. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and select this, assign it to my object just temporarily. And if you do this, you can start looking at this. If you turn off your wireframe unshaded, You can start looking at the silhouette and try to see what the quality of the silhouette looks like. Ultimately, especially with low poly objects, you want to make sure that you're not noticing a lot of hard faceting. Whenever you see these sharp edges along your silhouette, that's considered faceting. That's what that's called. You got to think about how your character is going to view your object in the scene, right? And from a distance, a normal distance about like this, it still looks pretty good. Okay, we've optimized our asset fairly well, but it still looks pretty good in the silhouette. It's kind of interesting, at least. It's not a perfect box. It has some shape to it. So again, just by applying a black shader, we can start kind of looking at our object in a different way and kind of see, how it really holds up. Okay. Now that I'm satisfied with that, though, I can go back and just apply back my Lambert shader if I want. Okay. And now we're kind of ready for some of those final details. Now, looking at the front, I know I want to do an extrusion because I want to actually add some depth to these bars around here. Okay. And so I know I'm going to need a shape that cuts through here to help me create this shape right here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just use that edge loop tool. So I can go to edge, and I don't even have to select the edges necessarily. I can just go in here to mesh tools and use the insert edge loop tool, and then I can just go ahead and drag it. Whoops. Before I do that, I want to check our settings. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit relative distance from edge, and then I can drag it in and place it wherever I want to. Okay. So I can place it right here at the bottom of this. And now I can see I have a shape that when I go to extrude, I can keep this little keyhole part on its own little area. Okay, so I have to keep that in mind when I get ready to start extruding this. Okay, now I'm also going to look, again, part of this is about looking at your reference and understanding what you're trying to work with. So I'm trying to create this inset right here, this shape on my object. Okay, so I'm going to go back in here, and now I'm going to grab just this face right here, this single face, and I'm going to do an extrusion with an offset. So up till now, mostly what we've used extrude to do would be things like this. We'd go in here and we'd go edit mesh, extrude, and then we'd pull out an object like this, right? Well, we can also basically do a scale in like this, okay? And that's what we're going to do next, okay? Go ahead and make sure I don't do, okay, so I didn't want to double up on that by accident, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and select this. I'm going to go ahead and go to edit mesh, extrude, go into the extrude settings, and now I'm going to go ahead, and right here I see an option for offset. Offset, it basically would allow it to scale in. Thickness is what you would change if you want to have it scale, kind of go outward like that first example I showed you guys. So what I can do here is just set a low value as kind of a starting point. Let's just go ahead and start at 0.5, hit apply. And you're going to see this piece kind of hangs around. You can still go in here and change it in your history as well. But I can also change it right here. So I can see that offset's obviously too extreme for what I'm wanting to achieve. So let's try something a little lower. I'll say 0.2. That doesn't look too bad. Just out of curiosity, let's just try 0.1. That's not enough. 0.15. And again, I can look at my reference image and see if it's getting close to what, but at the end of the day, just realize the reference is just that. It's just reference. You need to kind of, at a certain point, you're going to get away from it and kind of decide what looks the most appealing. So, you know what, I think I got like a little bit thicker than what the reference was, so I'm going to go 0.2. Okay, I'll leave it at 0.2. I'm going to kind of I'm going to make a mental note of that. I set my offset to 0.2 because I'm going to keep doing that around the entire object. Okay, and I'll leave that one there. Looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and do that again. Okay, edit mesh. I'm going to go ahead and do extrude. Set the offset to 0.2. There we go. Okay. Do the same thing here. Edit mesh. And if I actually change it in the extrude settings, then I don't have to keep changing it now. I'm going to go ahead and do 0.2. Okay. Now I can even just keep this open and just keep hitting apply. Okay. Oh. Which side's my front? Okay, that's good. So this is the back side, so I can do it there. Okay. And now for my front, remember that I plan on having that keyhole there, so I'm going to leave that middle one available for the keyhole. Okay. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just holding shift. When you're doing a lot of geometry, if you'd rather do it this way, you can hit on the select tool and you can actually use drag instead if you'd prefer. and then you can just hold shift and just kind of draw paint over the stuff you want selected, if that becomes easier. Okay, so there are other options. It's not to say that there's anything wrong with shift clicking, but if you find yourself getting like, man, this is tedious, and you'd like a different method, you can also set it to drag instead of marquee. Okay, go ahead and hit apply. Okay, we've got all our outline shapes. Okay, looks good. Now I could do the bottom also, but I'm making an executive decision right now that I don't ever plan on turning this box over. Realize, again, it kind of depends on how you're going to use this asset in your game, but for right now I'm saying, well, this box will never be turned upside down, so I don't really care what's going on in the bottom of this. Okay. Okay, so I've created my object, and now I'm ready to go ahead and add some dimension to this, add some, you know what I mean, some shape. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go into face mode, and I'm going to go ahead and select all these, and this is the, again, the fun part where I get to do a lot of these. Again, if I want to, I can go over here, turn on that drag type, and it might be easier for me to do it this way. I kind of have two options here. I can either extrude outward with the borders, or I can extrude inward with what I have selected right now. And it's kind of whichever I want to do. They should get similar results. Not doing anything at the bottom. Okay. Okay. All kinds of good stuff. Okay. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to Edit Mesh, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the Extrude Settings button. And now all I have to do is decide, again, we talked about how the offset would actually insert it. So we want to leave our offset to 0. And now this is really how much we want to do on our thickness. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go negative with it. I'm going to say negative 0.2 and see where that gets us. Okay. I've done that. Extrude it in. I want to make sure I'm not intersecting in the corners. That's a possibility if I go too far. You can see right here. You see how there's a little bit of a corner poking out. Obviously, I've gone a little too far. Okay. But again, I can change that value right here in this setting box right here. I'm going to go ahead, change that to maybe 0.1. Let's see if that works. Okay. Oops, not what I wanted to do. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm not overdoing it in the sense of I'm not actually to the point where I'm actually intersecting objects. It's still maybe a little bit too much. I can try. Then I can experiment with this a little bit. I can try maybe 0.08 and see if maybe that's even a little better. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks pretty interesting. I like the general shape of it. I think it's got some good character to it. And for right now, I think I'm good. So I'm going to go ahead and set that there. At this point, I'm basically saying my object is done. Other than obviously I need to UV map and texture it. The other thing I can think about here is a little bit of optimization. I can look at any shapes that aren't really doing anything and maybe remove a couple extra edge loops. We'll talk more about optimization as we go forward. But in general, you might want to look at a couple things, a couple of general rules. First of all, again, we generally want either quads or triangles. We don't want enagons, and we also don't want vertices or edges on our model that don't do anything. They don't contribute to anything. Okay, so hopefully you guys are seeing this, but if not, I'm going to point it out. Obviously, this is a really wicked enagon right here. Okay, there's not a triangle is a polygon that has 3 vertices. A polygon is a square or rectangle that has four vertices on it. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 vertices. So that would be a 9 edge. Yeah, whatever that is, whatever he said. It's one of those. So what we can do though is go ahead and dice this up so that we are using proper geometry. And what I can do is go in here to the Edit Mesh tool, and we'll see if it's that or if it's Mesh tools. It's Mesh tool. I'll just go ahead and use a multi-cut. And I can go in here and just clean these up. So I'm going to go ahead and just click here, go from vertice to vertice. Okay. And I just do that to do it straight. I actually don't need these diagonals. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these. Okay. But now these 3 are quads. These are 4-sided, and that's a triangle top. And that's just the way it worked out. Again, you can have triangles if you need to. It's not the end of the world. But just recognize that this is much cleaner and it reflects good modeling technique. Okay, do the same thing here real quick. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of those. Okay. Okay, so we kind of showed some examples of areas where we had some enagons. I don't know if I see any others. Did you guys see any other obvious enagons I need to fix? Anybody see anything? Okay. Now, let's go ahead and fix a few other areas where there's just no need, where the object doesn't really do anything. Okay. This edge, if we look here, this one that's flowing across here, I don't know, it's kind of borderline. It looks like it might be adding some shape on there. It's not doing anything on the edge. I'm torn about this one. Is it doing anything in here? It's doing a little bit of shape changing in here. So I'm not going to remove the edge from in this area, but I can tell right here it's perfectly flat. Okay, so this is a perfect example where if I wanted to, I can actually get rid of some of these. So let me go ahead and I'll just get rid of that. And I'll get rid of these. Does that one do anything? That one's kind of doing something. Okay. Okay. And then all I'm going to do, first of all, you realize when I deleted, I left vertices there. So you can see I got some vertices. I'm going to make sure I get those deleted as well. So you got to be careful. Again, I left some stragglers. That's why you use the delete edge vertex button instead of just hitting delete on your keyboard like I just did. Okay. Looks like I actually cut it that way. So I will go ahead and also do the same over here. And again, probably just to do it right, I'll go ahead and go to the edit mesh, delete edge vertex. Okay. Okay. And now what I can do is just turn on my vertex snaps and grab these. And I'm just going to go ahead, because again, these were not affecting the shape there at all. I'm going to snap these up here. Okay. Okay. And there. Okay. And it may seem like a lot. Some of you, I think some of the game people in here, hopefully are starting to see the, we didn't save a lot, but we did save some geometry, and basically that geometry was doing nothing for us. Okay. Recognize that snapping it to this vertice does not necessarily merge it. So technically there's still multiple vertices on top of each other. And so one final step we're going to take is we're going to make sure we want to weld or merge any vertices that are sitting right on top of each other. Okay. Other than that, I just wanted to show you a quick example of some optimizations we could make. And that's just a quick example of some optimizations we might make when we're working with a game asset. Okay. Now to address that final issue of this being multiple vertices on top of each other, I'm going to go ahead and just select the whole thing. And this is not a bad idea in general. Just make sure you set a really low threshold. And just to make sure that those vertices that were on top of each other do get merged, I'm going to go ahead and go to Mesh, Edit Mesh, and where are we at? Merge. And I'm going to hit Merge Settings. And what I want to do here is I want to set a really low threshold so that basically if two vertices are on top of each other, they will get merged, but nothing else does. If I set the threshold too high, let's just say set it at 1. Okay, that wasn't high enough. If I had done it high enough, well, let's just go ahead and I'll hit apply. And we're going to go in here, and I will go into my attribute editor and go to my poly. And if I raise this up high enough, eventually, eventually, great. I know.
Oh, no,
So it gets the best of us. But anyways, so that would have been an example of you would just set a really low threshold so that it welds those vertices. Okay.
Did you say it?
You didn't say.
I saved a while ago, but yeah, recently. So I'm going to go ahead and pause it now.